This is Algebra 1, test number 6 study guide. We actually finished through lesson 2.7. This says 2.5 through 2.7 division. 2.6 was distribution, or the distributive property, and then 2.7 was division. We have two multiple choice questions to start. The first one says the product of two negative numbers. You have to know what product means first. That means to multiply. So when you multiply a negative number times a negative number, it says it is always, sometimes, or never positive. These are the same signs, negative and negative. We learned that if there's an even amount of negatives, that means it's going to be positive. Same signs is always positive. First one. 2 says for every real number x, y, and z, the statement x minus y, and then notice z is right next to it. That means times z is equal to x times z minus y times z. So this is just a distributive property. Z times x is the same thing as xz, and z times negative y is the same thing as negative yz. So this, again, just like number 1, this one is always true. Then we start simplifying expressions. Negative 4.3 minus a negative 4.6 plus 6. Anytime you have minus a negative, remember you add the opposite. That means to add. Negative 4.3 plus 4.4. Those are opposite signs. That means you subtract the larger absolute value, 4.4, minus the smaller absolute value, 4.3. And what that gives you when you subtract them is positive 0.1. Then bring the rest of it down, plus 4.6. Both of those are positive now. Simply add them up. 4.6 plus 0.1 is going to be 4.7. Number 4 says the absolute value of 14 minus 13. Just do 14 minus 13 and you get 1. The absolute value, that means how far away is it from 0? It is 1 away from 0. Remember, that'll never be a negative number when you're talking about absolute values. Number 5 says 5.4 minus 5.4. So right away, those two numbers cancel each other out, so we can ignore that part of it. Negative 5.73 plus 2.7. Okay, you have opposite signs, one positive and one negative. Subtract the absolute values. The absolute value of negative 5.73 is positive 5.73. Minus the absolute value of 2.7 is 2.7. So when we subtract that from that, we have a 3 as the decimal in the hundredths place. 7 minus 7 is going to be 0, and 5 minus 2 is going to be 3. So we have 3.03. Then bring down the rest of it. Before we bring down the rest of it, remember you have to keep you have to keep the sign of the larger absolute value. Negative 5.73 was negative, so make sure you bring down that negative 3.03. Then bring the rest of it down. Minus 4.18. That's the same mistake I made, I think, on this problem the last time I did this study guide. But remember, you add the opposites, which means to add the two negative numbers. So they're both the same. They're both negative, so add them up. 8 plus 3 is 11. Carry 1, 0 plus 1 is 1, plus the 1 you carried was 2. And 4 plus 3 is 7. And keep the common sign that's negative. So you should have negative 7.21 for that one. Number 6, you're multiplying two negative numbers, negative 0.7 and negative 8.1. They're right next to each other, means they're multiplying. 7 times 1 is 7. 7 times 8 is 56. You have to move the decimal spot 1 time, 2 times. So from here, you're moving it once, twice, 5.67. And since you were multiplying a negative times a negative, that's 2 negatives, which is an even amount. So it's going to be positive 5.67. Number 7 is saying negative 5 raised to the second power. That's the same as this, negative 5 times negative 5 because of the parentheses. We know 5 times 5 is the number 25, and we know a negative times a negative is going to be a positive because it is even. Number 8, on the other hand, is only raising 10 to the second power, not negative 10. That's the difference between the parentheses and not. So what this looks like is 10 times 10, which is 100. But then you can't forget about this negative up front. It comes down to make it negative 100. That's a very common mistake on number 8. If you made that mistake, don't feel bad. Just got to eliminate that mistake from what you do. Number 9 says 1/2 times 24m plus 24. It's right next to the parentheses. That means you distribute it. Watch how easy this is. 1/2 times this. It's just asking you what is 1/2 of 24. We know that it's the number 12m. Do the same thing again. 1/2 times 24. It's the same number plus 12. We can't put those two together because they're not like terms. Number 10 is just written backwards. -9 minus c times -1. So you just distribute going this direction. -1 times -9. A negative times a negative equals a positive 9. -1 times c, again, a negative times a negative equals a positive plus c. And again, you can't put those two together because they are not like terms. Number 11 says to evaluate -x plus -4.9 for x's values equals 4.5. So negative, and then you plug in x's value, 4.5, plus a -4.9. Right here we have the same signs. They're both negative. Since we have the same signs, we add them up and we keep the common sign. When you add 9 and 5, you get 14. You carry a 1. 4 and 4 is 8, plus 1 more is 9. 9.4. And then keep that common sign that was negative. Don't confuse it with multiplication, not that one, but don't confuse it with multiplication from that one. Remember, when you multiply a negative times a negative, it becomes a positive. But when you add two negative numbers, like on number 11, you keep the common sign negative. If you need a number line to make this make sense to you, think of it this way. -4.9 is on that side of 0. If you subtract 4.5 from it, you're going to go this direction. It does not become positive when you do that. Number 12 says evaluate the absolute value of -x minus 2 times y for x's value is 3 and y's value is -4. So the absolute value of negative, and then you plug in x's value 3, minus 2 times y's value you plug in as -4. So do what's inside parentheses. This is -3. -2 times -4. Again, a negative times a negative equals a positive 8. And it's still in the absolute value symbol that acts like a grouping symbol. These are opposite signs. One's positive, one's negative. That means subtract the absolute values. So the absolute value of 8 is 8. Minus the absolute value of -3 is 3. 8 minus 3 is the number 5. That was the first part. The second part is to keep the sign of the larger absolute value. 8 was larger. It's positive, so it's going to be positive 5, but then you have to bring down these absolute value symbols that were around the entire thing. That does not tell you to make it into a negative number. Don't just reverse the sign. It's asking how far away is it from 0. 5 is 5 away from 0. It will always be a positive value. Number 13, 14, and 15 are all very similar. We've been seeing these for several weeks. It says write an algebraic expression for the phrase the product. Again, that just means to multiply of x and 4. So x times 4 is one way to write it. Probably a better way to write it is to write it this way. It's just a little bit shorter. Both of those are correct, though. For 14 and 15, you're just dividing the variable itself. So it says -4 minus a number. You can use any number you want. We'll just start with x. -4 minus, we know what minus means. -4 minus a number. There's your expression. The quotient, this is the same one we've been having again for a few weeks. This one's kind of tough. The quotient of 6 times a number. Again, a number, we'll call it y this time. 6 times a number means 6 times y. It says the quotient of that, quotient means divide. So the quotient of those two divided by 4. 6y over 4. Number 16 says the total cost to rent a boat is $16 times the number of hours the boat is used. Write an equation to model the situation if C is the total cost and H is the number of hours. So the total cost C equals 16 times the number of hours. C equals 16H. 17 is writing a fraction in simplest form. The number 10 goes into both of these. 10 times 20 is 2. 10 times 3, I said 10 times 20 is 2. I said it backwards. 10 times 2 is 20, and 10 times 3 is 30. There's no number that goes into both 2 and 3. That's simplest form. Number 18, you want to write it using an exponent. Well, it's represented 1, 2, 3 times, so 4 is being raised to the third power. There's your exponential form. 0.08, I'm sorry, 0.8 to the second power written in standard form is 0.8 times 0.8. That's standard form. But every time on a test this one comes up, it actually has you solve it to go ahead and simplify it all the way out. So we'll do it for this one. 8 times 8 we know is the number 64. And then you have to move the decimal one time for this one and another time for this one. So once, twice is 0.64 is what you're going to wind up with on this one. Number 20 is multiplying 0.05 times 5.7. Multiply 5 times 7 is 35. Carry your 3. 5 times 5 is 25. Plus 3 is 28. So we have a number that says 285. Count your decimal moves. 1, 2 times for that one. 3 times for that one. So if it's here, 1, 2, 3. 0.285. Then we're adding and subtracting fractions for 21 and 22. Both of those have unlike denominators. So you want to use the smallest number that 6 and 10 go into. You can use 60, but you have to do a little bit more simplifying at the end. There's a smaller number, 30, that they both can be converted to. They both go, that's the least common multiple, 30. So you ask yourself the question, what do I have to multiply 6 by to get 30? And the answer is 5. Multiply the top number by the same. 5 times 2 is going to be 10. I'm sorry, is that a 2 or a 3? 5 times 2 is, in fact, 10. Then ask yourself the same question on the other one. What do I have to multiply 10 by to get that bottom number, 30? The answer is 3. So multiply the top number by 3. 5 times 3 is 15. Now we have like denominators. Both of them are 30. So we want to keep that like denominator 30 and simply add straight across. 10 plus 15 is 25. Now you're almost finished. There is a number that goes into both of these that we have to simplify. The number 5 does. 5 times 5 gives you 25, and 5 times 6 gives you 30. 5 over 6. Again, you can multiply 8 times 12 and get 96, or you can realize that 12 and 8 go into the number 24. That's a whole lot smaller. That's your least common multiple. So again, ask yourself the same question from a minute ago. What do I multiply 12 by to get 24? It's 2, so 6 times the same 2 is 12. What do I multiply 8 by to get 24? The answer is 3. So 1 times the same 3 is 3. So minus is what's in the middle of them. Now we have like denominators, 24. Keep that like denominator, 24, and subtract straight across. 12 minus 3 is the number 9. Again, almost finished. The number 3 goes into both of these. It goes into 9 3 times, and it goes into 24 8 times. Number 23 might look like addition on your paper. Make sure you realize, correct it. It is division. 2/3. You change division of fractions into multiplication, and you use the reciprocal. Fancy word means flips. It means to flip it. 8 over 9 becomes 9 over 8. Now at this point you can multiply straight across and then simplify the larger numbers you get, or you could say I can cross cancel these. 2 goes into itself once and into 8 4 times. 9, the number 3, goes into itself once and into 9 3 times. So now we're dealing with much smaller numbers. We just simplified it at that point. When you multiply straight across, 1 times 3 is 3, and 1 times 4 is 4. If you multiply straight across, you'd have gotten 18 over 24, and you'd come back to the same answer when you simplified it. 24 is writing it as a fraction in simplest form. This is the spot after the decimal is the tenths place. The second spot after it is the 100th place. So that means there are 38 hundredths. That's what's represented. It's the last one, 38 100ths. That's not simplest form though, because there is a number that goes into both of those. They're both even. 2 definitely goes into them. 2 times 19 is 38. 2 times 50 is 100. There's no more numbers because 19 is a prime number. Write 0.98 as a percent. Again, that's the hundredths place. 100th percent means per 100. So all you have to do for this one is move the decimal 1 time, 2 times, and make it say 98%. 26 says a car travels 379 miles. That is your distance measurement. in 7 hours. That is your time measurement. It says find the unit rate and round to the nearest 10. Rate equals distance over time. Think of what a speedometer says. So for this one, we're going to put in rate equals, our distance value we said was 379 miles. And our time value is 7 hours. So that just says 379 divided by 7 is all it says. And when you divide 379 by 7, you get the rate value at 54.142. It says round to the nearest tenth. Tenth is one spot after the decimal. So we either want to leave that as 0.1 or we want to round it up. The number 4 tells you if you round it up or not. It's not 5 or greater. So your rate or your unit rate is 54.1 miles per hour. (27) says to evaluate u plus x times y when u's 14, x is 3, and y is 10. So 14 plus x's value is 3 times y's value is 10. Order of operations says to do the multiplication here first. 3 times 10 is 30. And 30 plus 14, addition is next, is 44. Evaluate a times b squared when a is 4 and b is 3. A's value is 4 times b's value is 3. Do its inside parentheses first. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 squared means 12 times itself, not times 2, 144. Number 29 says you can use the formula C is equal to 5 over 9 times F minus 32 to convert temperature in Fahrenheit to temperature in Celsius. What is 80 degrees in Fahrenheit? There's the F value right there. So C is equal to 5 over 9 times 80 now. That's what we plugged in or substituted, minus 32. 80 minus 32, you need to borrow one from that. It's going to be 10 minus 2 is 8. And 7 minus 3 is 4. So we have 48 when we subtract those two. Times 5 over 9 equals C. You know that you can multiply fractions by putting everything over 1. Then you can multiply straight across. 5 times 48 is the same thing as 5 times 50 minus 2. That's the distributive property. 5 times 50 is 250. But when you subtract 5 minus 2, it's going to be 240 for that. Over 9 times 1 is 9. 240 divided by 9 is 26 point, and it just keeps going, 26.666 degrees. It says round to the nearest tenth. That's one space past the decimal. So we want that to either become 7 or remain 6. Remember, you look at the one right after it. If it's 5 or greater, it goes up. So it's 26.7 degrees is your Celsius degrees if it's 80 degrees. 29 says a mountain climber ascends a mountain peak. This is sea level here. Little guy's going up a mountain. It says if the peak is 10,570 feet above sea level, that's this level right here. It says the peak is that high. The climber then descends. Ascends means to go up. You have to know that word. Descends means to go down. It says he descends 400 feet to go meet another climber that's coming up. So he goes down 400 feet, which means he subtracts 400 feet. So 10,570 feet minus 400 feet would be 10,170 feet. It says find his elevation when he finds the other climber. So when he gets to the other climber, 10,170 feet above sea level. 31 says the temperature on a summer afternoon is 72 degrees. Define a variable. So define a variable, x, there we go. And write an expression to find the temperature after it changes. Okay? Well, 72 degrees plus x. Okay? What that's telling us right there is 72 degrees and then the temperature's going up. But we know that we can add a negative number and make the temperature go down. So it says, then evaluate your expression, so the one we already have written, 72 plus x, for a decrease of 13 degrees Fahrenheit. 72 plus our decrease of 13 degrees means it's going down. So plus negative 13. That's the same thing as subtracting 13. Opposite terms, one's positive and one's negative. Subtract the absolute values. You need to borrow from the 7. 12 minus 3 is going to be 9. 6, since we borrowed, minus 1 is going to be 59 degrees. 32 says to evaluate b minus 2a minus c when a is negative 8, b is 4, and c is negative 6. Instead of b, we plug it in 4 minus 2 times a. Instead of a, we plug it in or substitute in negative 8 minus c. Instead of c, we plug it in negative 6. Notice we have minus a negative at the end there. So do your multiplication. Negative 2, remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally tells you to do the my dear or the multiplication and division part before you do any addition and subtraction at the end. So negative 2 times negative 8, a negative times a negative is a positive 16. So plus 16. Just brought the 4 down. Then this acts as if it has a 1 out front. Negative 1 times negative 6. Again, a negative times a negative is a positive. So multiplication and division's done. Last step is addition and subtraction. 4 and 6 is 20. 20 and 6 is 26. 33 says you made 2 deposits to your bank account this month. One deposit was $18.61. The other, or a second deposit, was $15.53. Your balance at the end of the month is $72.31. You made no withdrawals. So no money came out. So your balance at the end of the month is $72.31. No withdrawal, so you didn't subtract anything. So all we did with these was add these two together to get this. It says write and evaluate. It says an expression. We're going to write an equation for this one. Write an equation for your balance at the beginning of the month. Well, we don't know what the balance at the beginning of the month was. It's an unknown amount. Unknown amounts are represented with a variable. So this is the equation we'll come up with right here. X, or the unknown amount, plus 1861, the first deposit, plus 1553, the second deposit, equals the end balance, 7231, with no withdrawals. So you combine your like terms. Your like terms in this case are 1861 and 1553. We can combine those. 3 and 1 is 4. 5 and 6 is 11. Carry 1. 8 and 5 is 13. Plus 1 is 14. Carry 1 again. 1 and 1 and 1 is $34.14. So now we have X plus 34.14 equals 72.31. So it's saying at this point, what number plus 34.14 equals 72.31? What number plus that equals 72.31? So next week we're going to start simplifying and solving these equations. But in the meantime, X, or what number, your beginning balance was $38.17. Then number 34 and 5 are very similar problems. It says simplify 8 times 599 using the distributive property. We learned this on Tuesday. 8 times 599 is almost 600. 599 is the same thing as 600 minus 1. So the distributive property says we can distribute 8 times 600. We know 8 times 6 is 48, and then you just got to put the 100 part. 4,800, and 8 times negative 1 is minus 8. So 4,800 minus 8 is 4,792. 4,792. And you're going to do the same thing with number 35. It says use the distributive property to find the price of 8 CDs at $14.99 each. Again, $14.99 is the same thing as $15 minus 1 penny. So do 8 times 15. We know 8 times 5 is 40. And you got to carry your 4. 8 times 1 is 8. Plus 4 is $120. So 8 times 15 is 120. And 8 times 1 cent, or negative 1 cent, is negative 8 cents. So 120 minus 8 cents is going to be $119.92. And again, that's using the distributive property for it.